Life has a funny way of surprising you. Just like that unexpected day when I, Kenzie, accidentally flung a scoop of vanilla ice cream onto a stranger's pants in the park. You see, I'm somewhat notorious for my clumsy mishaps. It was a sunny day, and I was out enjoying my favorite ice cream when I tripped near a bench where a guy was engrossed in his phone. Oh no, I'm so sorry, I exclaimed as the ice cream landed right on his thigh. Surprisingly, he looked up more amused than irritated, and then did something I didn't expect. He laughed. Looks like I needed more vanilla in my day, he joked. His easygoing reaction lightened my embarrassment. I quickly pulled out some napkins to help clean the mess, apologizing for the unexpected ice cream attack. It's fine. Have a seat, he said, motioning to the spot next to him. I'm Wilson. Grateful for his kindness, I introduced myself. I'm Kenzie, and I think I owe you an ice cream. We hit it off immediately. It turned out Wilson worked in IT close to where I did my web design from home. We chatted about everything from tech trends to the latest movies. By the time we parted that day, we had already planned to meet up over the weekend. Fast forward a bit, and things with us were fantastic. However, meeting his mother, Mrs. Brown, introduced a new challenge. Wilson had mentioned she was quite traditional, but I wasn't fully prepared for the encounter. As I entered their family home, there she was, engrossed in an astrology book. Hello, I'm Kenzie, I greeted her, reaching out to shake her hand. She examined me from head to toe, her expression unreadable, then took my hand weakly. Wilson tells me you're a web designer and work from home, she remarked, her tone suggesting skepticism more than interest. Yes, I've been doing it for a couple of years now, and it's going quite well, I responded, trying to assert my professionalism despite feeling undermined. She hummed, her attention returning to her astrology book. And your birthday, dear? She inquired. After I told her, she scanned her book, tracing the lines before T.S. King. Oh, that's an unfortunate date, very challenging and astrologically incompatible with my Wilson. I maintained my composure. Well, we're doing just fine so far, I countered, even as she smiled condescendingly. We'll see, dear. These things tend to reveal their true colors eventually, she said, her words laden with implied doubt about our future. The visit was tense. Each comment from Mrs. Brown felt like a subtle jab at my career background and even my taste in clothes. It was clear I wasn't what she had envisioned for Wilson. Despite this, Wilson and I stayed strong. After 3 years of dating and navigating the chilly vibes from his mom, we were unshakable. One lazy Sunday, as we lounged on the couch watching comedy films, Wilson turned to me, his expression more serious than usual, a rare shift from his typical grin. Kenzie, I've been thinking, he began, and instantly, butterflies erupted in my stomach. What's up? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady even though my heart was racing. Wilson dropped a line that felt straight out of a rom-com. I kind of want to spend the rest of my life watching bad movies with you. What do you say we make it official? Quote, his smile was hopeful yet shy, which was unlike him. I laughed, not just out of relief, but because I deeply wanted this too. Are you asking me to marry you without a ring? I teased. He replied with a playful grin. Damn right I am. But I promise I'll get you a ring that'll make up for this not-so-grand proposal. As he pulled me into a hug, I realized just how much I loved him. Planning the wedding, however, turned into quite the spectacle, especially with Mrs. Brown offering her unsolicited advice at every turn. One evening, as we were choosing wedding invitations, there she was, hovering over my shoulder like a hawk, scrutinizing the floral design Wilson and I had chosen. You're not seriously considering this design, are you? She frowned. Mom, It's what we want, Wilson quickly defended. I like it too, I added firmly, determined not to let her steamroll every decision we made. It's your wedding, she sighed, clearly displeased. But remember, the invitation sets the tone for the entire event. The wedding day arrived quicker than we anticipated. And it was perfect, beautiful, even, despite Mrs. Brown's constant presence. Wilson looked absolutely dashing as I walked down the aisle toward him. His wide grin was all I needed. Our ceremony took place outdoors under a majestic old oak tree. The officiant was a close friend of Wilson's, someone who knew us both as a couple and not just as individuals. Do you, Kenzie, take Wilson to be your lawfully wedded husband, to heaven to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Quote, the same vows were repeated to Wilson, and as we exchanged rings, it felt like a triumph, not just over Mrs. Brown's snide remarks, the wedding stress, but against every challenge that had tried to derail us. You may now kiss the bride, the preacher announced. And Wilson didn't hesitate. As our lips met, cheers erupted around us. It felt like a scene from a movie. Only better. Because it was real. And it was ours. After living together for 3 years, buying our place was the next big step. We spent weekends touring homes, weighing features and balancing desires against our budget. One sunny Saturday, we found a house that almost perfectly met our criteria. Charming, with a spacious kitchen and a large backyard. The only issue was the swimming pool. I had shared my fear of water with Wilson, a fear stemming from a childhood incident where I nearly drowned. Since then, even bathtubs made me uneasy. But Wilson, ever the optimist, was enamored with everything else about the house. Kenzie, I know it's got a pool, but hear me out, everything else is perfect. And we're getting it for a steal, he reassured me as we stood in the backyard. I considered his words, taking in the beauty of the home and the incredible deal it represented. Okay, I finally agreed, deciding that the right home, even with a pool, might be worth facing some old fears, especially with Wilson by my side. I was quite clear about my hesitation to approach the pool, and Wilson knew this well. He wrapped an arm around me reassuringly. Don't worry, we'll sort it out. Maybe we could even fill it in eventually. For now, let's just steer clear of it. Moving into our new house felt like a dream realized. The spacious rooms and friendly neighborhood seemed perfect. However, it wasn't long before Mrs. Brown, who was always keen to voice her opinions, especially regarding financial matters and my career, decided to visit. As she toured our living room, her scrutinizing gaze didn't miss a beat. Her pursed lips were a prelude to the skepticism that soon followed. It's quite a spacious house, isn't it? Must have cost a fortune. Wilson, are you sure you can manage the mortgage payments? Mrs. Brown's voice cut through the air, and I could feel the tension building. Wilson, always the diplomat, attempted to ease the situation. Mom, Kenzie and I both pitched in for the house. It's not all on me, he said, trying to diffuse her skepticism. Feeling the need to defend my contribution, I added, that's right, Mrs. Brown. I also work. You know, my web design job pays well and contributed significantly to our ability to purchase this place. She scoffed, dismissing my profession. Working from home on your computer all day? That sounds more like a hobby than a real job. The rest of her visit blurred into a series of tense smiles and swiftly changed topics. Once she left, I exhaled a long-held breath, and Wilson comforted me. Ignore her, Kenzie. We know our truth. We're in this together, and that's what counts. As weeks passed, our house truly began to feel like home. I established my home office, which became my sanctuary. handling web design projects that not only paid well but also reinforced my capability and contribution to our shared dream. Wilson took care of the yard and the pool, which I avoided. It was another sunny afternoon when Mrs. Brown dropped by under the pretense of delivering some of Wilson's childhood items. But her true intentions soon became apparent. While attempting small talk in the backyard, her gaze drifted to the pool. "Kenzie, I never see you or Wilson swimming. Don't you use the pool?" she questioned. Caught off guard, I decided to be honest. "Actually, I'm scared of water. I had a traumatic experience as a child and almost drowned. I've been uneasy around pools and large bodies of water ever since." Her expression morphed into one of disbelief or disdain. It was hard to tell which. "That's quite unusual, isn't it? A grown woman afraid of a little water?" she scoffed. Embarrassment flushed my cheeks, and I attempted to laugh it off. But the discomfort lingered. Later, I learned that our conversation was more than just awkward. It was the start of a gossip chain. Mrs. Brown, in her so-called wisdom, had shared my fear with her friends and family, embellishing the tale to portray me as mentally unstable due to my water phobia. Rumors about my fear circulated back to me through a friend who had heard from another person. "Kenzie, is it true what they're saying? That you're too scared to even look at your pool?" Quote, feeling hurt and betrayed, I discussed the matter with Wilson, who was equally surprised by the gossip. "He did what?" he exclaimed. "That's it. I'm talking with her. This needs to stop," Wilson asserted, determined to confront his mother about spreading rumors. The confrontation escalated quickly. He made it clear that her actions were completely unacceptable. However, Mrs. Brown's reaction was even more defensive. She accused me of manipulating her son and trying to isolate him from her. One afternoon, she called me directly. Her voice was shrill and accusatory. "You're just trying to exclude me from the house. What are you hiding? Kenzie, are you meeting someone else while my son is at work?" Quote, her words were deliberately hurtful, and I was taken aback. "Mrs. Brown, that's absolutely unfounded. I would never cheat on Wilson. You know that," I responded. But her fury was unrelenting. "Oh, I know your type. You think you're clever. But I see through your games," she retorted. After informing Wilson about the call, he was incredulous. She said, "What? That's insane. Kenzie, you know that's not true." "And I know it's not true," he reassured me, trying to lighten the mood with a laugh. However, I couldn't shake off how deeply his mother's words had affected me. Wilson agreed that it was time to establish firmer boundaries. We decided that his mother's visits would be less frequent, and he would be present whenever she came over to mediate any potential issues. However, life took a strange turn. A few weeks after our last confrontation with Mrs. Brown, I began to notice odd occurrences. Small things that might seem trivial to others, but to me, felt like ominous signs. It started with a sense of being watched. This first happened at the grocery store. A prickling sensation on the back of my neck that made me feel as though someone's eyes were intently focused on me. Turning around, I'd catch fleeting glimpses of people looking away. Then, at the laundromat, the feeling resurfaced. I was folding clothes when that eerie sensation crept up again. Looking up quickly, I saw a man standing across the street, staring directly at me. I blinked, and he vanished. "You're being paranoid, Kenzie," I muttered to myself as I hurriedly packed my clothes. The real shock came one evening at home, while Wilson was still at work, engrossed in some web design tasks. I felt that unnerving stare again. Peering out the window, I saw the same man from the laundromat, faintly visible under the dim streetlight, unmistakably watching. Panic set in. I called Wilson, my voice trembling. "Wilson, I think someone's been following me. I've seen him a few times now." Wilson's response was soothing. yet unsettlingly calm. Ken, love, you're probably just tired. You've been working hard. Why don't you take a break? Despite trying to accept Wilson's rational explanations, the disquieting feeling persisted. I took up yoga and meditation, hoping to find some peace. But the anxiety of being watched remained unshakable. Then, one evening, as I was leaving the grocery store, it happened again. He appeared in the parking lot. I was prepared this time. Quickly, I pulled out my phone and captured a photo before he could disappear. Now, I had tangible evidence, not just uneasy nerves. That evening, when I showed the photo to Wilson, I saw realization dawn on him. Okay, that's definitely not normal, he acknowledged. Later, as we walked home from a nearby restaurant, Wilson's instincts kicked in. He grabbed the arm of a passerby. It was the man from the photo. Why are you following my wife? Wilson demanded, his voice filled with tension, his grip firm. The man caught off guard, his eyes shifting nervously, finally let out a resigned sigh. Look, I'm a private investigator. I was hired to keep an eye on her. That's all. Wilson's confusion turned to anger. Hired by who? He pressed. Your mother hired me, the investigator admitted, his tone almost apologetic. She wanted proof of infidelity. Furious, Wilson immediately called his mother. Mom, what the hell are you doing hiring someone to follow Kenzie? That's it. You're out of our lives until you can act like a decent human being. The conversation was intense, and by the end of it, Wilson was visibly shaken. He apologized to me profusely as we headed home. The next day, determined to protect our privacy, he bought cameras for every corner of our property. No one's going to invade our privacy again, he promised as he installed them. After the ordeal, Wilson suggested we take a vacation to get away from all the drama. Let's just go somewhere peaceful. Kenzie, just you and me, he proposed one evening as we sat on our couch. The silence of our home felt overwhelming. Eager for a respite, I quickly agreed when Wilson suggested we take a break. We settled on a secluded cabin in the mountains. The fresh air and stunning scenery provided the perfect escape. It was just us. No distractions. No prying eyes. Surrounded by the serene beauty of nature, I felt my stress dissolve. We spent our days hiking and our evenings cuddled by the fire. I was able to breathe, laugh, and simply be myself again. Returning home from the mountains, I was radiant, not only from the sun but also from a newfound joy. I was pregnant. We discovered the news a few weeks after our trip. A happiness profound yet mixed with a hint of anxiety. Wanting to protect our little miracle, I chose to work from home to keep the pregnancy private, especially from Mrs. Brown, fearing the stress she could bring. As my 9th month approached and it became harder to conceal my condition, Wilson and I decided it was time to celebrate openly. We planned a modest baby shower at our home, inviting close family and friends. Despite everything, I felt it was right to invite Mrs. Brown. Taking a deep breath, I dialed her number, my heart pounding. After 4 rings, she answered. Hello? Quote, Hi, it's Kenzie, I said, trying to maintain a calm voice. I wanted to share some news. Wilson and I are expecting a baby. We're having a little gathering next week to celebrate, and we'd love for you to join us. There was a brief pause, long enough to stir a flicker of regret. Then unexpectedly calm, she replied, I'll be there. The day of the celebration arrived, and our home buzzed with the warmth of family laughter and the cheerful speculation over whether our baby would be a boy or a girl. I mingled among our guests, often resting a hand on my slightly protruding belly, comforted by the gentle nudges of our unborn child. However, the pleasant atmosphere was soon clouded by my greatest concern, Mrs. Brown. Throughout the event, she maintained a distance but didn't hold back her harsh whispers. hinting to anyone who would listen that I was faking my pregnancy. Look at her. Barely any bump at 9 months. She's made it all up to trap my son and take his money, she spitefully claimed. To my relief, her words didn't find fertile ground. The guests shared knowing looks and eye rolls, familiar with her relentless criticism, and dismissed her claims as just another of her exaggerated tales. Yet Mrs. Brown was undeterred. I'll prove it to all of you, she muttered angrily as she left the gathering, her face a mix of fury and embarrassment, compelled by a mix of dismay and a desire to resolve the ongoing drama. I followed her to the courtyard near the pool. Can we just talk? This isn't true. And you know it, I pleaded, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. Her face twisted with anger. Save it. I know what you're up to, she snapped. As I turned away, hoping to end the fruitless conversation, I felt a sudden, forceful shove from behind. Losing my balance, I stumbled toward the pool's edge. The familiar fear surged as I plunged into the water. The panic of my childhood drowning experiences engulfed me as the water closed over me. Everything turned dark. When I regained consciousness, I was in a hospital bed, surrounded by the sterile beeping of machines. Wilson was beside me, his expression drawn and worried. How's the baby? I managed to croak out, my voice laden with fear. He gripped my hand, his eyes moist. The doctors, they had to perform an emergency delivery. He's in intensive care now, he murmured, his voice shaking. Tears overwhelmed me as the gravity of the situation hit. Our baby boy was fighting for his life. The next day, still reeling from the shock and weak from the ordeal, I urged Wilson, you need to check the security footage from last night. Your mom. She pushed me. It wasn't an accident. Wilson's face registered disbelief. Kenzie, are you sure? Mom can be tough, but to physically harm you? That just doesn't sound like her. Just please check the cameras, I insisted, anxiety gnawing at me, fearing he might doubt my words. He reluctantly opened his laptop and accessed the home surveillance system. As the footage unfolded, his skepticism turned to horror. The video clearly showed Mrs. Brown pushing me towards the pool. Oh God, Kenzie, I'm so sorry. I can't believe she would do this, he stammered, his face turning pale as he realized the truth. Without hesitation, he called the police. The evidence was undeniable, leading to Mrs. Brown's swift arrest. She was charged with assault and endangerment. A stark and painful resolution to a family gathering that had begun with celebration and ended in a grim battle for survival. During the trial, Mrs. Brown's defense claimed that her actions were meant as a joke, an attempt to expose what she believed was my fabricated pregnancy. She argued that she thought my pregnancy belly was a prosthetic and expected it to detach when I hit the water, thus revealing my alleged deceit in front of everyone. However, the video evidence and witness testimonies from the party told a starkly different story. The jury saw through her explanation, dismissing it as an implausible excuse for her dangerous actions. She was found guilty of assault and reckless endangerment. The judge, stern and unyielding, handed down a 3-year prison sentence and ordered her to provide substantial financial compensation for the medical and rehabilitation costs associated with our son's premature birth, a direct result of the stress and trauma caused by the incident. To cover these fines and compensation, Mrs. Brown was forced to sell her home. As our son navigated his early months, he faced numerous medical treatments and therapy sessions to aid his development, which had been hindered by his early arrival. This period was tremendously challenging for us, filled with frequent hospital visits and constant concerns. Yet, through relentless care and a series of medical interventions, he began to show signs of improvement. Throughout this ordeal, the bond between Wilson and I only grew stronger. Our love for each other and our son deepened in ways I had never imagined possible. As Mrs. Brown's release date drew near, I took a decisive step to protect our family's well-being. I successfully petitioned for a restraining order against her, which prohibited any form of contact with us, especially with our son. It was a difficult but necessary decision to ensure our child's safety and to prevent any further disruptions to our lives. One evening, as we put our son to bed, Wilson shared a tender moment with me, reflecting on our journey. "You know, despite everything, I feel lucky. We have each other. We have him. And we have a future," he said, smiling softly. This conversation marked not just the end of a distressing chapter but also the beginning of a new one. A story of hope, healing, and happiness for our family.